The next question I have is, what impact has intergenerational trauma had on the local Native community, and how's it impacted today's students?
I think it's what I would say is I would like to maybe give an example. I think that when an event happens, and I'm going to use the indentured movement, where most of the indentured slaves that occurred, those situations occurred out of these northern counties, and they were mostly all children. And so these children are indentured, and the only way you can really take children away from their parents is essentially to either kill the parents. I mean, many of you are parents, and just think in your own mind, okay, somebody's going to come in and take your child, and the first thing you think is, over my dead body. And that's essentially what happened. And so these people are then indentured, and they're children, and they go for a long period of time away from home. And even the boys were in the ranches, and the girls were in the house, essentially being servants. And at some point, they either run away or they come home. Okay, then you have a whole generation, because parenting is one of those art forms that you learn by being parented. Okay, so now the next set of people come along, and they don't have any parenting skills because they were never parented. And in addition, they don't talk about it. So these people don't know what happened. These kids don't know what happened. So these people who've been parented by essentially slave owners, that's the parenting style they adopt. But they don't even say where they got it from, because they don't want to talk about it anymore. And the problem, in a large part, is what he was saying earlier, it's not that long ago. So these generations are not that far back. When I first came home to work, there used to be people who worked in the building, in the main building, who had been indentured slaves, but they weren't going to talk about it. And that's just the way it was. So you get that pattern of behavior, and then you translate it out, and you get what people are going, why are they parenting like that? And I think back to my experience of, my mother always said, go to school, go to school. I was really stressed. I never went to school, never. 2-3 months a year, didn't go. And habitually. It wasn't just like in a certain year, I just didn't go. It wasn't something that I took to. For a variety of reasons. She didn't know how to deal with the conflict at school, with my being criticized, with her being criticized, whatever. And I never went. I just never did. So then I grow up, I have a child, and I'm traveling a lot because that was my job at that time. And I just took her with me, because I did. And then about halfway through kindergarten, I went, what are you thinking? How is this going to work out? Why are you doing this? And then I remembered this conversation that my mom had with her sisters. And it was, they were, I don't know what they were doing. They were in the kitchen, and they were talking or arguing about something that had happened many years ago, and it was about boarding school. And I'm like, you guys never told me you went to boarding school. And they all looked at me like, were we talking to you? And I mean, and that was the only thing they ever said about boarding school. That was their whole explanation of boarding school. But clearly, that experience to them left my mother, at least, with a very divided. I mean, she wanted me to be educated. Now, how she thought that was going to happen if I didn't go to school, I'm not quite certain. But the problem is that I picked that up. Fortunately for me, I got, or for my daughter, I realized, okay, this is a huge mistake. But that's because I knew where it came from at that point. But that's how it transmits on. It isn't like we sit around and talk about, oh, let's do this. It's really a learned behavior. Because I never had to go to school. I mean, I'm not going to brag about this to a bunch of kids, but I mean, I never did. I didn't go to college. I was a horrible student in law school. I went to my graduation because my brother said, you've got to go because Daddy's coming to graduation. I went, oh my God. So I rushed back to school because my brother had come to get me and we were leaving because I wasn't going to go to graduation. And people at my law school graduation went, who's that? Because I had never been in class. And it's like, don't let Daddy talk to anybody. That was the whole thing of my graduation is keep talking to him, don't let him talk to anybody. So that was, but it's not, that's where it comes from. And I think that's how it's played out. And that's what we want to try to break that chain, because in fact, you don't even realize it. I mean, I didn't even realize it. You know, why? I just thought, well, I'm a bad student. That's why I don't go to class. You know, and a couple of teachers along the way would say, okay, if you're not going to go to class, at least do the reading, do the stuff. We'll let you do that. You know, and so that's what I did. And I can read anybody under the table and still do. Can't do math, can't do language, can't do science, can't do any of that. But I can read anything you can get through by reading. I can do.
And Josh, just the impact of intergenerational trauma.
It's right now there's mounting evidence that trauma can actually affect your DNA, and traumatic events and historical memory can be passed down from generation to generation. Now I don't know if that's, I mean, I'm sure that's just theory at this point, but it makes a lot of sense to me in my experience. With a history of violence in my family and not knowing where it comes from, and a lot of the sadness and anger that you see in these young kids, and the assumptions that are made about where that comes from, you know, it's a lot of that is just, you know, people attribute it to things like poverty or drug abuse, and a lot of that definitely influences it, but it's a learned behavior that's passed down, and it also might be genetic. Because I have this anger and sadness in myself from time to time that I don't know where to come, and I don't know where it comes from, and I see it in, you know, the generations preceding me, and I know that some of the violent behavior and that kind of thing is learned behavior. There's some other things too that I think are, I think it's worth looking into and thinking about. And you know, some of these traumatic events happened just a few short generations ago. I mean, imagine the impact. I mean, up until it was, I think, 1920s, Indian scalps. There was a bounty on Indian scalps right here in this county. So that imagine witnessing an act of violence that horrific. How could it not impact you for generations? How could it not impact your family for generations to see something like that? And also, not only in sort of your just that anger, I don't quite know how to describe it, but it also, there's that resentment too. And think about also the resentment of knowing, it's like sometimes the pain in me is the more I learn about these sacred places around here, the more pain it actually creates because of that sort of that regret and that resentment. And that is something that these young kids learn as well. And it's not that their parents are saying these people were evil people, but just think of the impact. Well, yeah, this was once a sacred place, and they blew it up. You know, your ancestors were, bones are there, and they blew it up to make a pier or a jetty. So I think that some of that behavior that we often punish students for, if we gave the time to sit down and talk about where that comes from and what they're feeling, we might have a better understanding.
Josh, you already addressed this a bit, but I wanted to give you both an opportunity to maybe share, how do you think school leaders, principals, and teachers in the classroom, how could they effectively respond when they recognize this in a child?
it's really hard as a teacher, I know from experience, when you're in the moment and you have so much to do and you have to think about all of the kids learning, and there's a student who's being disruptive, disrespectful, and maybe even hurting others. It's very difficult to be sensitive in those types of situations. But I think I've taught myself how to do that over the years, and what it's done for me, and it's actually by learning about this stuff and learning about these families and this historical trauma. And all of a sudden, when I changed my thinking, and I don't blame that student or judge that person, things can turn around, really, in the classroom. When I really take the time to listen to their story. And I'm thinking more, I don't have a lot of experience with the younger generation. I'm thinking more about youth, and which is the age group that I work with, and what has worked for me. So, yeah, I mean, and that's what you would do with anybody, I think, who is having a lot of problems. Just listen.
Judge Abby?
Most of I would agree with everything he said, and I would add to that human beings by nature need the contact of other human beings. And when I have a child that, even when I was on the bench, that was really having a hard time conducting themselves, I would get off the bench and I would sit down and talk to them. And I realize what he's saying. If there's a number of people in the class, that's hard. But if you can get them as soon as possible to a place where you can one-on-one with them, that's probably going to be the better course. And say, I know that you're not. To me, I go, this is not making you happy. What can we do? What can we do? So that I try to align with that person and say, how are we going to make this better? How is this day going to get better? I don't want to have to do something that is going to be hurtful to either one of us. So it's really trying to figure out how to align with that person. And also teach them. It's like he's saying he taught himself not to be triggered. Because there's certain things, depending on what age they are, that are going to be triggers. And so you have to go, okay, you have to learn how to deal with this. Because you can't do this. You just can't. I have a client now that we're dealing with, and I just said to him, you're too big. When you stand up and yell and scream like that, you scare the hell out of everybody. You cannot do that, period. You have to sit down, and if you're going to raise your voice like that, he said, well, you're not afraid of me. I said, no, I'm not. But any regular person ought to be. Oh, okay. Because he's like huge. He's 6'4". He weighs, I don't know what he weighs, but he's just big. And so you have to just say that, and talk with him and say, you can't act like that. You just can't be that in community. And what I stressed over and over is you're in community. And in community, we have to act in a certain way so that I make them be in community, I'm in community with them, and it's really about community behavior and community responsibility. And it's not just individualized, it's really, you're in community, you don't want to scare people, you don't want to hurt people, and just that over and over until they get that, and then teach them, if you're going to get mad, let me know, you tell me first, and we're going to help you go to a place where you can sit down until it passes, or whatever, that will help them do that, is to give them the ability to try it, because they have to learn to control it, because just like I'm not going to be there, you can't be there for them every moment too, because they are going to go, so they have to learn it. They just have to, or they're going to hurt somebody or get hurt, and so it's really about getting them to slow it down a little bit and see if they can control it and give them some tools. This tool doesn't work, I switch to another one. I see another metaphor or whatever until I just find out what's going to work, for them, and see what they do, or just say, okay, why don't you go, if this doesn't work for you, go in the back and draw, and then when you're done with your drawing, bring it to me so I can see it, and then we'll talk. It's partly the more you know your kids, the better, you know, that can work, and the more time is given. And, you know, the whole thing about all the forced testing and stuff that you guys have to prepare them for really takes away from your ability to have a relationship with them. But the more relationship building I think you can do with the individual students, the better they're going to be for it. You know, and like I said, but for the teachers that I had contact with, my life would be very different. You know, very different and not very pretty, frankly.